Hello everyone, welcome to Enterprise Decoded, a technology podcast about the systems we build and the people those systems are built for. Hi, I'm Anji Maram, and each month we will explore AI, data, platforms and automations and enterprise systems, not through the hype or buzzwords, but through intentional, empathetic and humble leadership. Here is the format. In every episode, we will cover the good, the bad, and the ugly. What's working, what's broken, and what we need to face head on. Welcome to Enterprise Decoded podcast. Today, we are going to cover one of the most important topic, the investigator mindset, solving the right technology problems. Technology organizations are brilliant in solving problems. They build fast, they ship often, they optimize relentlessly. But there is a silent epidemic inside enterprises, inside enterprise teams, solving the wrong problems with tremendous skill and confidence. The investigator mindset is not a methodology, it is a discipline, one that separates technology teams that create real business value from those that generate activity without impact. Today, we ask, what does it actually mean to frame the right problem before you build the solution? Joined with me today is Tony Sorensen. Tony is CIO at Five9. He's best known in the industry for business value he creates through technology innovation. Tony, welcome to the podcast. I'd like you to give a little bit introduction about yourself, if you can.
Yeah, thank you, Anji. It's good to be here. Always fun to be with you, whether it's on the golf course or here in the office. But so I've been a technology leader in the Bay Area for 20 years in different software companies and technology companies. And I'm proud to be with Five9 for the last dozen years and watching them grow. And now with the wave of AI, it's everybody's learning, and how do we implement it in our organizations? How do we really get value out of it for the whole company? It's a fun journey we're on right now.
Tony is also a customer advisory board member for Workato. Workato is one of the popular integration platform as well. Tony, more than your professional career, which obviously everyone knows, I think one thing that I want to talk about your personality is, I think you are one of the most trusted C-level professional leader that I ever known in the Valley. I really thank you for knowing you, and then you are a very, very good human being. It's a rare combination to get in one person. I just want to say that, and I told you many times, but I just want to say in front of everyone here. Welcome to Enterprise Decoded podcast, Tony.
Thank you, Anji.
So Tony, we'll dive into the topic today. So just want to start with a simple question. Tony, engineering organizations today are tremendous pressure to ship the code fast, and they want velocity, throughput, delivery cadence, because it's really pushed by the pressure, peer pressure, management, C levels, everyone, right? And velocity in a wrong direction is how employees spend millions solving wrong problems nowadays. That's what we see in many organizations, right? Where does that breakdown actually begin, and why does the framing gap still exist in organizations that have really smart and capable people?
I think about it in two ways, Anji. The distance between the customer and the engineer, when that gets large, what gets lost is, what is the outcome we're trying to generate for the customer? How do we solve a real problem from them that moves the needle? And so one of the things we're already seeing with AI is that distance is being shortened, and we're seeing higher quality products being developed. But additionally, in a traditional software development world, you've got a customer, you've got product management, and then you've got engineers, right? And the product manager's role is to listen to the customer and to translate what they heard into something the engineers can build. And so if the product managers don't get that right, typically the product engineers aren't questioning the requirements that come. Their job is to create code. Their job is to produce the product that the product management team has said they need. And so the challenge there in this context is, how do we ensure that what's being built satisfies a problem statement that's going to be monetizable with an outcome, right? So those are two areas that I think about. I have an example on the IT side of the enterprise, right? Things that I've seen is CIO or CTO, here's a problem statement from another executive. I need this. And then they say, okay. And then the business part of it says, well, can we sit down and talk about the details? And the executive, the technology executive says, no, I've got it. I know exactly what you need. And they go off and they build something and they come back and it's nothing like what the business customer needed. And then the business customer goes out and buys what they want. So you spent 3, 4, 5 months building something, time, energy, money, opportunity cost to actually work on something that's more value, and it doesn't get used, and you go spend money to buy something else. So the problem you're describing is a very real problem. Companies have limited resources. You have to put your money and your investments where you think you're really going to be able to create outcomes that customers need. Another example, Anji, you've participated, Critical River has, in the CIO marathon in the Bay Area.
Yes.
And, there's 60 to 80 CIOs in the room for the marathon. And many years we have customers or companies come in and they've got a product and they've developed it. And they're asking us, does this meet a problem statement that you have? But they've spent all that time and energy, and now they're trying to figure out if they've got a problem for it. And if not, can we help them generate a problem statement they can pivot to? Yeah. So really investing in the time up front to know what the problem is, what the expected outcome is all money saved in the long run. The other challenge that I see with the process of taking customer information, requirements, outcomes you're looking for, going through product management and into engineering is that there's not always business cases built for what's being asked to be developed. So, what's the expected sales forecast? What's the cost to operate? What do we think the bottom line profitability is going to be? And then the question should be, does sales want to sell this? Will they take this and take it to market? Or if we take it to them and say, this is what we want to build, will they say, I'm not hearing my customers ask for that. I'm not sure this is something we're going to sell, right? So there needs to be a business case, but also some way to validate that through data or through other folks in the company and what they're hearing from customers. Other things to think about are the question of what's the role of the developer? Have we really equipped developers with the skill set and the mindset to question what's coming in to them to build, and question it in such a way that they're questioning, is the problem statement right? Is the outcome that you're looking for right? This happens on my team as well, right? We get requests that come in all the time, and we have to spend time training my team to question that, not just do the work, but say, is this really going to add value? And I can tell you there's work that we do that people say, oh yeah, this is going to be great. And we go look at it 6 months later, it's not even being used, right? So we try to ruthlessly make sure we're working on high value items, but there are things that get through because it's a challenge for people that normally it's not their job to question, to now question. Not to be a blocker, but to question and say, help me understand what we're really trying to accomplish. Is this going to get us where we need to be? So there's some work to be done on all teams to train and help people feel comfortable. And then those people writing the requirements have to be okay with being questioned, not because people don't trust you, but because we're trying to validate that the investment we're about to make is going to be the payout that we want at the end.
The developers, the DNA and the trait that you mentioned It's always been the case. It's always been the case. I think nothing changes whether you use whichever technology to solve. Developers still have to be that investigator, have to still ask the same questions before they start building, basically. Whether it is using AI era, whether it is pre-AI era, whether it is even before that. I think that doesn't change anytime.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, the discipline, as you started with, of good practices up front doesn't change with the use of AI. In fact, it makes it more essential. So prior to AI, we would spend 80% of our time up front understanding the requirements, developing the requirements, designing, architecting, right, planning, and we would spend 20% of our time actually coding. And now that needs to flip. We need to spend 80% of our time doing the planning and 20% of our time doing the coding. Right now, the expensive part is using AI to code things.
Yeah.
So if we're just saying, I'm just going to go build a prototype and then tell me if you like it, how much money are you going to spend iterating to get to the right product?
Yeah.
Right. And we've heard Uber and ServiceNow, they ran out of tokens for the whole year in their full budget allocation in May. And I was just with some of the ServiceNow executives. They are going through training for their entire company to know how to optimize their use of their AI spend. Right? Every company should be thinking this way. So it behooves us to do more work up front than to try and just build and iterate.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you for putting that in that perspective. So, Tony, if you look at the pressure to move fast is real now. And then the spend without diagnosis is the most expensive kind of engineering there is. That's what you're explaining. Professor Dr. Vijay Garbaksani spent decades of his time in studying the economics of digital transformation, and he's also founding director of E.C. Irvine's Center for Digital Transformation. He has built his career exactly on this argument that the gap that enterprises face usually is not a technology gap. It's a value capture gap now. The organizations really investing and heavily investing in digital capability, but still fail to translate it into business outcomes. That's what you're really explaining, taking examples of Uber example, ServiceNow example. But the investigator mindset is how organizations, have to start closing the gap between what they're spending versus what is the value they're getting. And they have to really close the gap before the wrong problem ever gets embedded into the roadmap, right? I mean, if you kind of summarize this, the topic that we took in the first segment is moving fast in a wrong direction is not a velocity. It's really a drift with a deadline. And the most expensive line of code is the one written solve the wrong problems, basically. So that's the kind of, I just want to summarize what you said in that way. So now, if you get into the next segment of the podcast, let's kind of ground this in the practice. Let's talk about the good things, the good part of this podcast, which is really working. Where this investigator mindset actually delivering measurable results, and what does discovery-led engineering looks like when it is really working, and what does it really changes?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the Standish Group's chaos report still describes that 20% of IT projects fail. So right off the bat, you can say, look, we're going after 20% of our budget spend, at least our investment in developing code, right? So there's a big number there for a lot of companies. We need to start by going back to what is the outcome that we're trying to achieve, and get away from the mindset of what features do the users want. The features of the customers, the business customers, they typically talk about features. Even my business customers come to me, I want this new feature. And my team will often say, okay, hold on, let's back up the bus. What's the problem statement that we're trying to solve? Let's walk through your pain points here. Let's understand, are we solving for the symptom, or are we solving for the root cause? And so with that, we can slow down, get the right design, to get the right problem identified, understand the outcome we're looking for, then we can design to build for the outcome. So that's the process shift that has to take place. When you think about what Amazon does with their PRF method, right? They get into real details, discipline around, here's the problem statement, and here is the customer release that we want to have. So it paints the picture of what are we looking for? What are the FAQs that we want to produce? So it forces the people writing the problem statement to go a level deeper, not just to think about the problem and the requirement, but what is the messaging we want to send out? What is the impact we want to communicate to the world with the product that's being delivered? We have a saying in IT, right? Brakes are for going fast. So you need to sometimes slow down, get the proper definitions of things done up front, validate them, then you can move quickly in the end. But it feels slow process at first, but then accelerate once you're able to release the work. So here's one I just heard another CIO was telling me. He had a team, his team building a product. They delivered the data product. The people who needed the product looked at it, looked good. They looked at the analysis coming out of the product, and the analysis was wrong. And so they went back to the engineers and said, "Hey, that's wrong." And what they said was, "We met all the requirements, but you didn't get the outcome you want." So having the engineers not be connected to the business in a tightly coupled way means that you're going to have these gaps in actually delivering what needs to be delivered. One of my friends often says the surgery was a success. The patient died, right? Everything looked like it went right, but you didn't get the outcome that you wanted. What do we think about when we think about, a well-framed problem statement? It would bring out multiple different solutions, not just one solution, right? That gives people a wider scope to look through and say, how do we solve this problem? Stakeholders align faster when you have a clear, properly defined problem statement. Stakeholders can align really quickly, and you can start using that to refer to. So we have a project going on right now where we documented the problem statement, and I called it the North Star. This is what we're trying to get to. Big, ambitious, solve this problem. As we released the work to get done, I started noticing that we were gravitating away from the North Star. It was the North Star plus.
Yeah.
And that was making the North Star harder to solve for. Hold on, folks. They don't solve for the North Star. Let's put those aside for now. Let's focus where we need to get to. And so we've used that several times to pull the project back and get streamlined. And now the team understands. We have one mission on this part of the project, and it's to get the North Star done. But we took the time up front to really hammer it out, define it, put it in front of our e-staff and go, this is the problem statement. And we keep being able to go back to that all the time.
Tony, thank you for reframing the problem up front, right? So I just want to give one example that in my career, I've done a lot of problems, a lot of solutions that sits on the data. Most of the times we kind of make a lot of assumptions on the data and thinking data would be in this way, data would be in that way. And we build the systems. And engineers really, forget to ask right questions around what would be the data format, how the data comes. Most of the times we develop the code, we make everything, and we think we have done a fantastic job in writing code. But what we always miss in building these systems is putting the real test to the data that actually comes from the field. When we enable the system we build, suddenly a lot of field data comes, and the system start breaking. There, we typically in a program management, people start blaming, oh, I've done right job, and then their data is wrong. That's where most of the large programs in an enterprises gets delay. It's mainly, okay, data is the problem. Yes, data is the problem. The fundamental would not change. The unlock is the reframe. So that means developers, the engineers have to ask the right questions so that the problems would not face end to end in the field, basically, right? When the teams really own the problems instead of the features, then they just stop being the order takers and then they start being the investigators. Shift that turns the delivery or engineering organizations into very impactful organizations so that they really are adding value, right? I think in the examples that mentioned, the Spotify did not get a better backlog or Monzo did not get a bit bigger support team. They just got better question. That's why those examples were successful, right? The best engineering team is not the one that shipped the code fast. It's the one that asks the best and right questions before shipping so that the systems do not fail in the field, right? And a well-framed problem is the engineering team's most underrated competitive advantage. That's something that nobody tests nowadays. Everyone tests for the engineering skills. They let them go through a bunch of questions, and then they interview in that different way. Just want to kind of summarize that in that way. I think the engineering teams or solution teams should be the ones who should be asking right questions before they build. In that way, I think we can avoid all the problems that we're talking about.
So Anji, you mentioned Spotify. So one of the things that Spotify did was they went to a squad model of cross-functional team members, right, owning the outcome rather than the feature. This became one of the most widely used organizational patterns in tech. The core principle are squads are expected to challenge the framing, not just execute on a spec, right? Understanding the business outcome is key for the squads to building successful products. This model has now been replicated through many organizations, right, as a standard for getting high value out of the investments they make in products they develop. The rest of these don't tie to what we were just talking about.
Thank you, Tony, for clarifying on the Spotify use case. Now we get into our next segment, which is the bad. The bad here of the podcast is what's not working. We really talk about what's not working in here. So organizations know they should do discovery, and they invest in a lot of user research. They hire top product managers. They run a lot of workshops, but the problem framing still fails. Where does it break down in practice in most of the organizations as per your experience? And then why does it keep breaking down in organizations that know much better than many organizations in the world? So we know a lot of top organizations, but they still kind of fail to kind of frame this. This is one of the area that we have continuously seeing. That's why in many of the research that we are talking about, majority of the number of programs fail just because of this reason, basically. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You're asking, why don't groups get the right problem statement? It could be several reasons, right? One is they don't take the time to get it. Somebody says a problem statement, it's taken for granted. This is the problem statement. Maybe it came from a leader. Maybe it came from somebody like me. This is the problem statement. Nobody takes the time to pressure test that. No one takes the time to say, what evidence or data do you have to support that? Where is this originating from? So it needs to be checked, not just accepted, right? People don't ask for data. Is there one customer saying this is a problem, or do we have, our entire customer advisory board saying this is a problem? Do we have, a feature request with 1,000 likes on it that this is saying we have a problem statement, right? So trying to understand what it is, why is it, maybe asking the 5 whys. Okay, are we talking about the problem or are we talking about the symptom? Can we drill into that? Okay, why is that? Okay, didn't get that. Okay, why is that, right? Go down as far as you can get to try and find the root cause and say, how do we solve that, right? That's the thing that unlocks the rest of the problem statement being fulfilled. So there's several reasons that, this takes time to do. And as you've already pointed out, speed is of the essence. And it's never, I don't think engineering organizations have ever felt more pressure to deliver quickly right now. Mine included, right? It's like, how quickly can we get things built and out the door? But again, it starts with getting the right framework, getting the right problem statement. You know, I take it very personally if we spend 3 months building something that misses the mark, right? I have limited time every year, limited resources, limited investment budget. We can't make a big mistake like that, right? We want to get this as right as we can. So several reasons, and it's hard to go slow when the business like, hey, I need this right now. Well, right now won't be as good as what you really need. Give us a little time to build it. The challenge when discovery is done by one team and delivery by another, right? Again, the shorter the distance between the business and the development team, I think that the closer we're going to get to the outcomes that are needed. You still might need that product owner to describe the problem statement, to understand, and they have probably more time to spend with customers. But you've got to have the engineers that really get close enough to know what's being said and what the outcomes are.
I just want one question. I think this is so hard for many companies to do. Do you think, is it something that skill gap where we can fix this by training people to have the better skills to question upfront and get this out?
Yeah, I think that's true, Anji. Like the squads that were created, right? They were empowered to ask that question. They were expected to ask that question. I'm sure they were probably trained to ask the questions to see if they were building the right things. As I mentioned, we're training some of our team to be able to ask the right questions and to feel confident. You know, if a Salesforce admin has to question a director about whether this is the right thing to do, they don't always feel empowered to do that. You know, teaching them how to ask the right questions in a nice professional way, not as a blocker, but is this really the investment we want to make? I think every company should be doing this.
Yeah. So, I mean, assuming we fix a skill gap, that means now come to, because most of the organizations can hire highly skilled people to do this. At the same time, when they hire, they can train them to better skills. So, but still, you know, every organization has a capacity to do this right. At the same time, every organization has a capacity to do this right by fixing skills or by hiring the right skilled people. But I think even after that, the failure is not almost never a skill gap. It's primarily the way I've seen is a structural one. So most organizations, they don't give teams the mandate to question the brief that will keep producing technically excellent answers to the wrong questions. You know, they'll keep calling it rigor. But if you look at discovery theater, is worse than no discovery. You know, it gives the illusion of rigor while wrong assumptions stay buried. That's what happens in the process. And engineers who don't know why they are building something, they can't tell you when to stop. So that's the kind of problem that we see. I think having a right structure, structure to do the right things, I think would naturally, I think, would also avoid some of those failures in this process. Because of course, as you mentioned, having the right skills or upskilling them with the right talent and everything, that is something organizations can invest and do that. But I think most importantly, having a right structure to do the right things in a very structured way is the most important thing based on what you have said. That's what I've seen as well, basically.
Yeah. If you can create the structure after the training so people know what to do, how to do it, give them the structure where it's naturally, this is a part of everything we do, it starts to become natural to question, to ask, are we doing the right thing? And hopefully realize some of the things that are being asked or being said or a problem statement actually aren't a problem statement, right? You know, in one case many years ago, you know, I was told, oh, sales needs X, Y, and Z done, built, right? I said, okay, tell me what that looks like. Get to all of that. Okay, what's the value we're going to create? Oh, it's going to increase our bookings by, I don't know what it was, $3 million. I said, okay, so if we build this, we're going to increase our bookings by $3 million. Yes. Okay. Is the CRO going to sign up for $3 million additional quota? He wasn't. Right?
Yeah.
That wasn't a project that was fully vetted. We had to ask the questions, and we were able to go do something more valuable for the company because we didn't lose the opportunity cost to do the right thing.
Exactly. That's true. I mean, if we don't know that's what CRO is signing for, then obviously we're not even asking the right questions, and then it's going to be failure. And then once it is done, I think nobody's going to use it or nobody's going to own it. I'm glad that that's a great example. I think I'm glad that you were able to do that. And also, I think there's some examples that I can bring in good scenarios where I was part of multiple programs in my career. There were complex systems that were supposed to be built. Ideally, in any enterprise grade company, it takes a year or more than a year to do. But we took some of the programs in the past and finished it in sometimes 6 weeks, sometimes 3 months, depends on the complexity. The only way we were able to get that out and then made it successful was primarily because everyone in the program, including the business stakeholder, the builders, investigators, everyone, exactly on the same page. Okay, this is what going to give it. Business was signing for that. Business was ready to do that. And then builders and investigators were ready to deliver that. And then in 3 months, everyone was working together cohesively. Of course, I mean, there were a lot of issues and all came. That's part of the any projects like this. But we did those, made use and then successful. Those are like good examples. I think, like no matter how many millions you spend, if right questions were not asked about outcomes, about ownership, about quality of the data, about is it something that everyone would adopt and then use it, then no matter if you've spent 50, 100, $1 billion, whatever it is, then it won't be successful, basically. Yeah.
That's
So
right.
yeah. So I think great. I think thanks for bringing that perspective. Now we'll kind of get into the next segment, which is the ugly part of the podcast, where we always struggle to talk and where we really need to confront. That's the topic we talk about. When teams consistently solve wrong problems at scale, what are the second and third order consequences? And then what organizational dynamics make it genuinely hard to introduce the investigator mindset into an enterprise culture that built around delivery speed? This is one of the tough segment in most of our podcasts, is like which most of the people kind of know it inside. They don't want to talk. They don't want to confront.
Yeah.
That's why we kind of kept this segment. And most of the people I've interviewed, this is one of the kind of topic where it is always a little tough to get it out.
No technical executive wants to, have a project or initiative that fails to meet the mark, and some fail in a significant way. And so when that happens, you have all the time, all the cost, not only to create the code, but you're also probably operating it in a cloud environment, so you have expense. And nobody wants to say we failed and turn it off, right? There's always a chance somebody could buy it. There's always a chance it could add value. And so it's a challenge, right? But you've got to have criteria for success. You should really have criteria for, we missed the mark. Let's turn this off. Let's stop investing in it from an enhancement perspective, from a security perspective, from a cost to operate perspective. Let's turn that off. Those are hard conversations, right? Nobody wants to admit we just spent 4 months and we didn't solve the problem that we're supposed to solve. So this is where we go back to, did we get the problem statement right? Did we ask the right questions right? We want to have a high probability of success. I know in my company, the projects that have the highest amount of success, what do they have in it? Tightly coupled business and IT, in the process of defining the problems, in the process of understanding the requirements, the user stories, understanding the constraints we have to work through, understanding the enterprise architecture and how are we going to stitch this throughout our whole ecosystem, right? Those work the best. Whenever the two groups don't operate together, probability for failure increases, right? So we work really hard to partner with the business. And then in the business, we have to be a consultant. We have to say, hey, let's go down this path. Let's peel back a little bit on that onion and understand what is it that's really back there. Maybe we're going to have somebody go sit with a person for a day or a week to capture the problems, the pain they're feeling, to see what they're trying to describe in words, but they don't have the technical acumen maybe to describe it. So we sit there and we try and understand. There's an old story around Kaizen where, foreman went into the manager's office and says, I need to have another person. I need to hire another person. Well, why? Well, because the station is getting behind on the factory floor. And so the manager goes out and he just watches and he watches and he watches. And what happens is in station one, the guy's got the wrench he needs.
Yeah.
But a few minutes later, the next guy comes over and grabs that wrench and takes it to his station. Right. And they're going back and forth, which is slowing everything down. And the manager comes back and says, you just need another wrench. We'll buy a wrench. You don't need another person. Right. So we have to help the business understand what's the problem we're trying to solve and how do we solve that? What's the right way to architect it into the business that we've got running? So there's a lot of things we can do to reduce the risk of failure.
The uncomfortable truth is that problem misdiagnosis is not a technical failure. It's a leadership failure. So in your example of where a manager observes where the whole process needs a wrench rather than a person was the right leadership. Like that, there are a lot of examples that we can talk about it with the wrong leadership. So where it caused so many catastrophes, basically. The investigator mindset requires psychological safety at scale, and that does not come from methodology. It actually comes from the top, comes from the leadership. A culture that punishes the question, or are we solving the right problem, will always build the wrong thing with the precision, right? And then the most dangerous engineer in an enterprise is not the one who writes bad code, is the one who writes best and perfect code for wrong problems. Mm-hmm. That's why it's very important to bring the culture in an organization where we encourage the culture where people ask the right questions and then create solutions for that right questions, basically right problems. And also another way is the culture should be in a way where management and the leadership should not punish some of the right questions or should not reward some of the wrong questions as well. It's really bringing the balance where the leadership foster the culture of asking the right questions and then solving for those right questions. Mm-hmm. is what we need to do. So I just have a follow-up question on that, right, Tony? What does an organization that has genuinely embedded this investigator mindset actually look like operationally? So, and what should technology and business leaders do today to close the gap between the culture they have and then culture they need to? Knowing you are one of the best leaders and you've been in finance, I'm sure you've done a lot of these things operationally correctly. And then you pretty much, because most of your team has been with you for a long time. There is a reason for that. I think you kind of brought and fostered the right culture where you were rewarding right things and you were punishing for wrong things. And what did you do to kind of fill the gap in your organization based on your experience, or you can give some of examples from your colleagues that you have seen in the industry? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think there's an important word there in what you said that I'm not sure I quite agree with. I'll challenge a little bit. And that was, reward for the right things and punish for the wrong things. And when things go wrong, and they will go wrong, nobody's perfect, right? There's a couple of things in the culture that you need to have. One is we need to establish a culture of accountability, not blame, right? Accountability, extreme accountability. Look, my team, we own it, we did it, we're going to fix it, right?
Yeah.
And that permeates to my customers, right? And then the second thing is we don't have a culture of blame. We're not having a meeting, an after action review or a post-mortem because we're looking for who to fire or who to dock their performance at the end of the year or whatever. That's not it. We're looking to understand how do we get better, right? So I think to build the culture that you want, to be able to challenge proactively, like what happened, and when we miss the mark, what do we learn from it? It takes the leadership, as you pointed out, to say, look, I may be upset, but I'm not upset with you. I'm upset that we failed, but let's figure out how we are going to get it right the next time. I remember when I was early in my career, I was working in an organization with the CTO, and one of our people, longtime individual contributor, made a very expensive mistake at a customer site, and it was hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I thought, oh my goodness, this guy's going to get fired. It was a huge mistake. And I kind of pulled the CTO aside. I said, hey, what's going to go on? He says, why would I fire him? He's a good employee. That's the most expensive learning lesson he'll ever have. He'll never do that again. Why would I not keep him, right? So you have to change the culture at the top that says, look, we don't want to make mistakes all the time, right? That's not what we're talking about. But when we do make a mistake, it's like, okay, how can we get better, right? And once people understand that we as leaderships are in it with them, it changes the whole mindset and frees them up to ask questions before we get into the development and build phase.
Thank you, Tony. I think I was kind of using wrong words, I think. So I think I agree with you. It was not like more of a punishing, it was more of a correcting and then giving feedback.
Yeah.
Was the right way to say. I think you kind of know us. We always, I think even from my level, kind of, it's very important to reward the right things so that they can do the right things over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
When obviously mistakes happen, we kind of should teach them to own it up, which is what I think we've been practicing from the time that you know us, which is what we always appreciate us. You guys kind of own up mistakes and then do the right thing, take accountability. We made so many mistakes. In fact, some of the best relations that I ever formed in the industry is by making mistakes. So made mistakes, owned up, and then as human beings, people appreciate that. I think that's a mindset. As long as I think our teams really understand that by seeing us doing, then I think things will get better.
Mm-hmm.
I always kind of caution people that, hey guys, do mistakes, but don't try to do the mistakes. Be extra cautious when some things are very critical. For example, when you're going production live, don't just treat it as a initial testing cycle.
Mm-hmm.
Just be extra cautious, reduce the mistakes. That's the kind of signal, warnings, cautioning that we give. Yeah. That's what I think our experience kind of gives that. No, I agree with you on that. I think that's a very important way. I think now I understand how you're able to foster that kind of culture. And thanks for bringing that point. Yeah, appreciate that. So with that, Tony, the investigator mindset is not a design thinking workshop. It's really an operating discipline, as you kind of explained it. It's really the discipline that is put in operation, that is put by management, that is put by leadership. And it's the commitment to understand the problem before committing to the solution. It's the same discipline that Professor Vijay Garbaksani has spent his career pointing out enterprises towards, that digital investment only compounds into real value when it's governed by economic and strategic discipline, not just the technical execution, right? And the organizations that embed this, they don't just ship it, they just ship better software, and they make better decisions, and they retain better engineers, and then they compound their technology investment instead of writing it off. I think in most of the examples that you have seen, projects fail and then they had to write off. I think if you kind of bring that operational discipline, if we kind of bring right governance, so the organizations that win the next decade of technology won't be the ones who build fastest. They will be the ones who know what to build and what not to build. So that's the most important thing. And discovery is not the phase before delivery. It is actually the discipline that makes delivery matter. So with that, Tony, really appreciate your insights in this topic. And thank you so much for joining us in the Enterprise Decoded podcast today. Thank you. Appreciate, Tony, for making it our day.
Yeah, as always, Anji, it's great to talk with you.
Thank you, Tony. Let's get to work.